Oh. Act like we are minor support staff that I am.
That's where my seat is as well.
What do you mean? You're the tech genius. You're going to be upstairs to get things working.
Well, I just heard something there.
Well, then you got it.
We'll see. Now where? But it won't hear if I tap
Copy
it.
Nick Jarvis, it says.
Yep, should be working now.
Do you want me to just click on and see what happens if I do it?
Sure, yeah, see if you can get audio. Then I can start the video too.
Find your email.
I think it's going now.
Okay, do you want this one also?
Yeah.
I'm gonna click it right here to see if I can come up.
Sounds like you did.
Yep.
Yeah. Now, what do you want me to try something to see?
If you can hear us on your end, we should be good. Right, you can hear it out of the tablet. But I'm seeing cool.
Now, I just gotta get out.
Yep, perfect. We're ready to go. Oh,
Leave me. I have left the meeting.
there you go. All right, we've got Prezi ready.
What does this Zoom cost you generally?
I forget, it's individual logins and it was pretty cheap.
It certainly is a nice system. I can't imagine why more cities aren't using it when they do their telecommunications. You know, want to call in.
Yeah. The thing is, the more people who join, the more it costs.
Oh, yeah.
So for a city to do it and the general public join,
joins,
yeah.
it's real expensive.
But I mean, I feel like it would be, I don't know how you could really, I guess if it was a meeting and not a hearing, you could just listen and not have the option to join in really.
Right.
And that would probably be cheaper.
You get a quorum, and
If everyone who says,
I could tell from the tone of your emails that you were worried about quorum.
yeah, that was the question. Let's go.
You didn't express it exactly that way, but
Yeah.
I read between the lines.
Well, I mean, Ken really just wants us to do like a legislative discussion.
Well, yeah,
So
but you know, it's set from 9 to 10:15, right?
Yep. And
One decision kind of deal.
yeah. Yep.
Mr. Chair, how are you?
Hello, Roger.
So in committee right now is the municipal convention bill,
Which one?
convention bill,
Oh, all that, one that needs to worry about.
it's all be fixed. We'll be good.
It's another example of how minor things that no one knows is going on at the legislative council's office and the rest of the cities, and they're completely unimportant, make people upset.
Yeah.
I mean, like Lloyd Carr, who's done it his whole way, and Fruit Heights and
Cornish.
Cornish and
Wendover.
Abiona and all those guys. This is the way we've always done it. You screwed it up, nobody asked us.
Yeah, it's exactly
And
right.
it's a minor deal that no one would have cared about, one way or the other. And people up at the legislative council, people who in the governor's office, never even understood that system, or even knew what was going on, or even cared about
Justin Lee told me that there was a legislature where confusion was out of Carter. And planned to run a bill to repeal it altogether. And Adam left to pursue other opportunities. And then Justin told me that he can't help himself. He is going to say in his testimony this morning that it's weird, but the DLG is fine with it.
it. Yeah, you see, that wasn't even considered weird. It wasn't even considered weird back in the old days, because, and it's the fact that they used the word convention, and these guys were.
That's not so loaded.
It's loaded and it's tied into that party system where you parties have a convention. When what it really is a nominating committee who gets together and recruits candidates.
Well, because I have to come in here, Rachel's going to testify that I was driving that work home. This is about recruitment. The Parson Convention is about narrowing the collection.
Yeah, it's not the partisan party convention system, it's.
Was not in back.
Yeah, Wendover, everybody's had a chance. Let that cycle through. So it should be fixed.
Well, that'll make people happy.
Yeah. so-
I'm doing all right, how are you
So we
doing?
can kind of hospital continue there.
Brush this in my back.
Oh,
I'm assuming you want to take it out.
Do
Do you want to add, is that the first thing, or?
Yeah.
I mean, everything's
I
supposed to be
was
so.
hoping
Is it just the fact that it was worse, or is it a surgery that?
correct. It was supposed to. Problem is,
Oh, it's not a failed surgery.
oh no,
Hasn't been
my
done.
surgery is gallbladder. It is, it's not this one, it's just floors and everything, we're taking. The problems I had was this knee, it was just coming out from the head. Then I started to be shooting pains in my back, it's on this side. I went to some chiropractor, she says, well, you changed how your body, that's this back. This is right. So what you need to do is be off of everything for a little while, so that's not right now. Well, when you do back brace, to where what that does reduce the pressure on the back that's causing this. And,
Is it helping?
oh yeah, I can't wear all the time. And it's better than it's a chemical store. So,
I've been real lucky with my health in my life. I've never, in fact, I should go for a checkup. I've had a checkup maybe 10 years ago. I haven't been to a doctor or procedure or anything my whole life, nothing.
I've seen what head work cancer. I think it's good.
I've had zero, I've had nothing in my whole life. So when it happens, it's just gonna fall apart all at
It's
once.
all that I get with arthritis. It's just a combination of these four.
Yeah, you see, my worst problems are work. I've never been on any pain medicine, so I've never been on that procedure done on me. I've never had any.
The reason I do this knee is as fast as
When you come to meetings and watch the people on the Zoom, you realize what you should do is not click on your before you're on. It's your.
except like my teams used to be like commercials and everything else. Or they don't look like a great big satellite.
Yeah. One folder for each of the zero permanent ones. And then one folder for 5.
Well, they gonna change the sales tax.
Not yet.
I still think there's a big left of the step A, but it's closer than I've ever seen it.
Well, the problem is there's too many vendors here to see how long. Be like the loyalty.
Well, the change, are they raised? That's true. I like it.
Make it clear to.
Declaration of who's on the hit list is not public.
Still the lawyers and barbers.
Yeah, a lot of money barbers.
But I think
Barbers and
Yeah.
salons.
Barbers and lawyers.
You're talking logistics.
People they can see.
Yeah, but you should.
Oh, I just want to read those things, so also.
Yeah, Susan, I asked Rachel what she thought about regional policy or something.
Yeah.
She thought it was talky enough, that we should go regional policy. Before I go, I want to show you some of the improvement online. Some of the
don't have.
anti-growth people, and because I think. When we get done with this,
Also,
I'll bring it up here too, because there's a lot of online organizing going on right now.
and we need to talk about that.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi, Don.
How y'all doing?
Hello again there.
Can you hear me okay?
How was shoveling your driveway there, Mike?
Yeah.
I didn't have to do.
Oh, we saw the pictures of the snow on the mountains, it was epic.
Well, there's still snow in the mountains, but it melted pretty quick yesterday down here. But there's a lot of wet.
Oh, there's some snow.
Yeah.
Here's your office.
So the I view in this Zoom meeting is identical to the Brady Bunch setup. Humorous.
Don't know if they're seeing me yet or not. Hmm? No.
Yep. So we're just waiting for a few more people to join and then we'll have a quorum.
Okay, let us know. Have you got me in yet, Nick?
Sorry?
Have you got me in yet, Nick?
Yep.
Okay. Let's see, we've got myself and Mike Mendenhall, Don Christensen, Nick, you're there. And then let's see, Mark Christensen. Who else have we got?
You got Dr.
Gary
Barnett.
Hill. Dr. Barnett, Damon, Mayor. Let's see. We got Jewel Allen.
Gary Hill's here.
Gary Hill. Doing great. Couple others that I can't, that their names aren't coming up, but.
Yeah, we've got a couple phone numbers. One's Gary, and then who do we have? The 435-901-1407.
That's Meg.
That's Meg's. Cameron memorizes everything.
Very good. Well, we're getting close, aren't we, Nick?
Yep, it looks like we've got looks like we have 9 voting members, if I'm counting right.
Okay.
And we need 11, right?
I believe so.
We need 11 to take action, but we can start. We're not taking action until the end. Today's not in, so let's just do that.
Should we do
Sounds
it?
like good to go, Mayor Pike.
Okay. Does everyone have a copy of the agenda before them, digitally or otherwise? If not, it's pretty simple. We'll just talk you through it. First of all, welcome everybody. Appreciate you getting together. We're going to try to zip through this as quickly as we can. First of all, I see on site, it looks like only league staff. Is that right? Cameron and Nick and Roger, David, Susan, is that who I see there?
Yep.
Okay. So thanks for joining by phone, everyone else. Conflict of interest disclosure, I don't expect we'll have any today, but this is your big chance to declare if you see any board members that have conflicts on this or potential conflicts on this agenda. Seeing none, I'll go on and we'll just go right to key legislative issues, which is really the whole focus of this meeting. Cameron, take it away. I believe it's going to be you leading us, you and Roger today. Others, I believe, are on the Hill. Is that right?
Right.
Okay, so why don't you start with referendum? That's probably the easy one, right?
Yeah, and actually today it is.
Yeah.
For those who are doing the video, we'll pull up the Pretsies so people can see. If not, if you're not on the video, that's fine. I'll talk you through it. And also, Meg, since you're on the call, you'll be pleased to know I just finished my breakfast of cookies, so I'm ready for the day. Okay, it's pulling up right now. Mayor Pike and I chatted last night. We got board members, and then we also invited some of our key internal group that help us at the Capitol participate in this call, and we talked through several of these issues with that group on Thursday. So our primary objective today is to make sure that our elected officials and the intergovernmental people who are advocating for you at the Capitol are all on the same page on some big issues. We don't have LPC this week, so we will be asking for a ratification of positions at the end of the meeting. Hopefully we'll have a couple more people participate before then. If not, Mayor Pike will have to just ask the officers to do that for us. So with that being said, let's jump into referendum. So Nick, just click on referendum. There you go, play. Okay, that worked. Okay, real quickly, I'm meeting this afternoon with Legislative Research and General Counsel, as well as Representative Don and a few other stakeholders, for what I hope will be the last negotiation on referendum before the bill goes live. We're shooting to have it in committee this week. The key components, based on the feedback we received from you, has been to first improve the communication piece. What we are proposing is really trying to use the framework of campaign law, both that exists at the federal level, and clarify the city cannot engage in any sort of press advocacy or functional equivalent, which is a term that's used in the campaign world all the time. We've also defined or offered a definition of factual information. And the definition we've offered is to say that any materials that the city creates prior to the council action that is being referred, that information would be considered factual information that then could be disseminated through normal city channels with a brief statement explaining it, summarizing it, and explaining the timeline, but it could not be used as advocacy. So in other words, I'll pick on Mike Mendenhall since I see his bearded mug. If Spanish Fork City Council acts and you have all this information before you when you act, your act gets referred, the voters are now considering whether or not to uphold or reject your act. They should have access to the same information you had when you cast your vote. And so that's what we're defining as factual information. that information could be disseminated, but you could not advocate one way or the other. And we think those terms just work better than what is currently in the code. I've sent that out several times for feedback from our internal work group and received enough feedback that we were moving in the right direction that I felt confident sending over the draft to Representative Dahl last night, and then we'll see how it goes this afternoon. Any questions on that communication piece?
How can we share that information, Cameron? We're still, all the information that I would have received about an issue would have come to me through my city email, but you're saying as an elected official, I'm still not forwarding, using my city email to send that information out to constituents. That's got to come some other way.
Two different answers to that, Mike. Number one is that you could disseminate the information through normal city channels. So for example, if you have a newsletter, you could refer to all this factual information there. To me, what makes sense is the city website would have links to the packets that have been prepared in anticipation of the vote. And so you could direct people to that website. But again, you couldn't advocate one way or the other, but you could at least explain or direct them to information that explains why you voted the way you voted. The second piece to the answer is that we've proposed that a city person can respond to a direct question or a specific inquiry about the referendum. And so that would be the other way, is if you get that question via email, then you can respond via email to that question about the referendum. The other option, this would be number 3, that we're going to propose this afternoon. I'm not sure if they'll buy this one or not, but that by ordinance, Spanish Fork City could designate a spokesperson on the referendum, and then all the two-way communication with the city could go through that spokesperson. The idea there being, of course, that rather than every potential employee at the city answering questions, you as a city could say, this is, we want the city manager, and so we're going to pass an ordinance that says the city manager is responsible for the two-way communication. Any other thoughts on the communication side?
Jump in if you have them, folks. I guess not at this point.
Okay, let me touch on 2 other things, geographic diversity and the timing of the ballot title. On geographic diversity, I spent a lot of time with the County Clerks Association trying to figure out how to make this work. The request from the board was to exempt cities smaller than 10,000, and Representative Dahl thus far has agreed to do so. So I thought I saw Richard Barnett on the call earlier. He and Andy from Park City and Emily from Moab all brought that point up. And so what we're proposing and we expect he'll accept is that geographic diversity would only apply to cities of the 4th class. We're still working on the final number. If the number would be, the number right now is between 3 and 8 sections of the city, or what we refer to as geographic diversity zones, voter participation zones. The ask we're going to make is that a city be required to designate voter participation zones after the 2020 census. That way, instead of St. George having to create zones now that match a constitutional standard, you wait until the census is done. The counties will be redrawing precincts at that time anyway, and then the counties would be on notice to draw precincts with a deviation of 15%, which is still higher than a one-man, one-vote standard, but it's closer than what precincts are now. And then the geographic diversity zones would follow precinct lines, which would make it easier for organizers collecting signatures, and it would make it easier on the administration side. So that's the proposal we're going to make this afternoon on geographic diversity.
So just for the remedial student here, so they would match new precinct maps.
More or less. So let's say let's say St. George, for conversation purposes, has, let's say you have 10 precincts, or let's say you have 20 precincts, okay? We've been trying to figure out what the right number is of these zones. The county suggested 3, 5, or 7. I had originally suggested 8, so as to keep it away from what a council or commission, county commission would look like. Let's say for conversation purposes, it ends up being 4, and organizers need to hit the 10% threshold at 3 of the 4 zones. So in St. George's case, you have 20 precincts. Ideally, each zone would have 5 precincts. In reality, that's not quite going to be the case because it's based on the number of active voters, and the precincts don't have the same number in each of them. So you would have 4 zones that would have roughly the same number of people, but the key word is roughly, because one zone may have 4 precincts, another may have 6, because the precincts, or the zone with the 6 precincts are smaller precincts, and the zone with the bigger precincts would have 4. But the deviation would be close enough to a constitutional standard that we think it would uphold or be upheld by a court.
Okay, but it's still, the basic building blocks are precincts.
Yes, that would be the building block, which then would save cities a good chunk of the expense compared to if we were to implement it right now, where you'd have to draw your own maps before the census without being able to rely on precincts.
Got it.
So that's the concept.
Any other questions on that, board members? Okay.
Can I ask a quick one? Sorry. So if a city has only 5 or 6, not to make it all about North Logan, even though we all know it is all about North Logan.
I spent enough time with Val Potter the last few days that I do feel like everything's about North Logan.
That's excellent. But we're over 10,000 population, but we've only got 6 precincts, and so we're going to be in a world where we're hacking precincts in pieces and having to really work through an awful lot to achieve the geographic diversity. Is that going to be a widespread issue, and should I expect it to be difficult to draw lines that cross precinct boundaries?
What the county clerk suggested for the North Logan support, and I'm glad you brought this up, because this has been one of the obstacles we've been trying to navigate, is that for maybe cities of the 4th class, the number should be 3. So then organizers would need to hit the threshold of 2 out of the 3 zones.
Gotcha.
So in this case, the math actually could work if there are 6 precincts, because after the 2020 census, the county clerk would be on notice to draw the precincts in such a way that you could build 3 zones out of it. That doesn't mean it would be 2, 2, 2, but they would know we have to have a 15%, no more than a 15% deviation amongst precincts for purposes of these zones. That's why doing it after the census makes a lot more sense, because then they can draw these maps with these zones in mind.
That sounds great. Thanks, Cam.
Now,
I have a question, if I could, Nick.
Yes.
I'm having some trouble hearing. It sounds every now and then like somebody's playing a mandolin instead of on the microphone. But I don't know if it's my internet connection or if it's coming from there.
Are we having other audio issues around the broadcast? Yeah, it sounds like that might be on your end.
Okay.
It's coming clear on my end.
Comcast about that blazing fast internet again. I hope you caught the sarcasm.
I did.
okay, here's the last thing on referendum that I want to make sure everyone's comfortable with. And that is the timing of when to develop the ballot title. Currently in the law, and actually you can unshare the screen if you need. I'll check that for you. Currently in the law, the ballot title is determined at the end of the signature gathering process when signatures are verified. The referendum organizers have requested changing the timing of when the city prepares the ballot title to do the ballot title up front during what we've proposed as the pause. The pause being before signatures start to get gathered, there's a 20-day period of time for the city to determine if it's legislative or administrative, and for both sides to start preparing the legal and fiscal analysis and the arguments for or against the referendum. The current law says that the ballot title gets prepared when the signatures are verified and the referendum is placed on the ballot. And there's a process for appeal of the referendum, but the timing is really tight before the election. And so the organizers initially wanted somebody outside of the city to prepare the ballot title, and we said no, that was a non-starter for us because you're referring our action, so we need to write the ballot title. So then they suggested, what if the ballot title is prepared up front with those other materials so that we have a greater opportunity to appeal judiciously? Is that the right word? I think that works. But in order to appeal for the judicial branch, the ballot title. I wanted to bring that forward to you. It's a new request, and it's one where, from a political perspective, we've been pushing the envelope on communication. The Property Rights Coalition has been pushing the envelope on geographic diversity. This is one where the organizers could get a quote-unquote win in the process, be able to feel like they got something out of this bill. But I want to make sure that we aren't supporting something that could be detrimental to cities. I've heard back from a couple of cities in the work group who I asked this question to over the weekend, who said they were comfortable with changing that timing, but I wanted to see if anybody else had any concerns. And that goes for both board members and for members of the advisory group who are on the call.
I'll talk just a little bit here again. The wording of ballot titles is actually something in my day job, I've done some scholarly research on, and that really does have a significant effect on the way people view an initiative. That said, publishing it a little bit earlier rather than later doesn't cause any skin off my nose, as long as the cities get to have the first mover advantage in terms of proposing and setting a title.
Thanks, Damon. Other thoughts? It's okay with me.
Yeah, me too. I agree with Damon. I think the key is that cities get to write it.
Yep.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay.
Actually, Pam, sorry, this is Mark Christensen here. Our attorney dealt with a really nasty and he was very cautious about having to be the one to take the political heat on writing that, especially if a council were divided on a particular issue. And so I know our city kind of dealt with something that was very specific. Yes, we like the idea of having the ability to take the lead on it, but it's also there's also this emotional side of staff being concerned that they're going to get thrown out into that very politically charged environment. So just be aware that's the concern that's been voiced as the attorneys that are trying to draft that language have faced these issues.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you for the feedback that you and your attorney Kevin have provided on the draft. There are multiple pressure points in the process, whether it's for the city attorney or for the city clerk, the election officer, and the tricky part about trying to preserve and retain local authority is that sometimes local authority creates some difficult situations. Any other thoughts on referendum before we move on to the next issue? Heather, thanks for the comment.
Yep, none from me. I think I'd still rather have the opportunity to frame it by, you know, setting the title personally than letting someone else do it. So
Yeah.
I recognize the challenges, but.
Perfect. Well, I'll let you know how the negotiation goes this afternoon on it. We wanted to make sure I reported back, and this was really the last chance to get some feedback based on our previous discussions on this issue. If there are no other questions about referendum, then we're going to move on to sales tax, Mayor, if that's all right. I want to make sure we give.
Everyone okay? All right, let's move on.
Okay.
I'm fine with it.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Don. Okay. Next is sales tax. I expect that one's going to take a little while, so Mayor Pike, it's okay. Let me quickly insert SB 34, the housing bill, just to give a quick update on that, and then we can dedicate the rest of the time to talk sales tax.
You bet.
SB 34 is the housing affordability bill that came out of the commission and was supposed to be in House committee this afternoon. The Senate passed it last week. Rachel's done a tremendous amount of legwork on this bill. She and I presented to the Senate Republicans and the Senate Democrats last week and really lobbied it hard in the Senate. There was a substitute bill, and I want to make sure everybody's clear on why we moved forward with a substitute in the Senate. The version of the bill that the commission endorsed initially laid out a menu of items, and cities had to choose from this menu of planning items to try to facilitate more housing in cities. Cities had to pick 2 out of the 22. Cities had to have until December to comply, and then by December you have to submit a report that then determines your eligibility to access the state transportation investment fund. So the incentive is the access to the state TIF, which has more than $700 million of transportation money. The responsibility on cities was to pick 2 of the planning items and incorporate them into your moderate income housing plans. Okay? We knew that there would be an attempt to hijack this bill to do 2 things: increase the number of menu items that cities had to pick and replace the eligibility to the TIF with withholding of Class C revenues, gas tax revenues from cities. Those are the 2 lines of attack. Last week, we sat down with Senator Andrick and Representative Potter. And Damon, by the way, Representative Potter deserves a medal for the work he has done on this bill. And we've been talking internally about how to make sure that the 2 of them get the credit they deserve for the work they've done on this bill and the even-handedness with which they've approached it. We sat down with the 2 of them, so we know these attacks are coming. They heard it as well. So they said, what are you willing to do? And we said that based on the feedback from the LPC and other conversations, we felt like we could increase the number that cities had to pick from 2 to 3, or if a city has a BRT station or train station, tracks or front runner, to 4 planning items. Okay, so North Logan, for example, would do 3, St. George would do 3, Spanish Fork would do 3, Provo would do 4, Salt Lake would do 4, West Valley would do 4. And the Senate was, generally speaking, supportive of that change. And we felt like it was a good faith effort on our part to respond to the feedback from senators that 2 was not a large enough number. The other thing we did in the substitute was we tightened some language. Before, existing law said that a city had to consider the utilization of certain funds, and the substitute now says that the city must apply for or partner with an entity who applies for these funds. So there's more of an action on the part of the city, not just consideration. Senator Andrick and Representative Potter were very pleased with these ideas, drafted the substitute, and we substituted the bill in the Senate, and it passed out of the Senate with 28 votes. The political effort on our part was to get the bill to the House in a way we could say to legislators, no substitutes, no amendments, pass the bill as is. And we've already moved on a couple of fronts. Nevertheless, we were told on Thursday and Friday after the bill passed by lobbyists for the home builder and development industries that they wanted the number of planning items to be 7 per city, and they were still going to make the attack on the B&C. I sat down with Representative Schultz, who's a member of House leadership, and asked him point blank if he was planning to amend the bill, and he said no, and then nobody had approached him, and he was supportive of the bill. And then we confirmed through other sources that indeed he is not the hijacker. We haven't identified who the House member will be, but we're very concerned about it and feel like we need to do a full court press on it. My question for you is this. From our perspective, a number like 7 dooms cities to fail. Damon, I'll use North Logan as an example. Even though that list has 22 items, several of them are very specific, I don't foresee a day when North Logan could ever provide mortgage assistance to employees of the city, right? But that's one of the menu items. So the purpose of the menu was to highlight best practices that different communities use and maintain flexibility for cities to figure out what makes sense for them, recognizing there's a December deadline. So there's going to be a lot of work required of cities over the next few months. We think all 7 does is doom cities to fail, so that the same interest groups can come up next year, show our failure, and use it as a means to attack us. If the B&C gets inserted instead of the TIF, then that basically means that North Logan will never see another Class C dollar. That leads me then to my question for you, which is are you supportive of the line in the sand at this point with the 3 and 4 menu items and the TIF? Or is there something else that you think that we could do to try to ward off this attack proactively, such as potentially increasing the number to 4 or 5, or doing something else?
Personally, I'm concerned about proactively offering any more. I think we've already done that. I think if we had no choice, you'd have to help us, Cameron, understand maybe how many we think we could go with. But I don't know personally that I want to proactively do anything else. I'm pretty comfortable with a line in the sand. That said, I would love to hear what all of the rest of you have to say if you have strong feelings. But I think we could, I don't know, Cameron, you tell me, but I think we could beat this if we had to, without offering any more. And maybe we end up having to take a couple more, but I'm really concerned, and I think I'm trying to figure out what country we're living in. If they're trying to tie this to paying employees' mortgages, that sounds rather socialistic. I'm just wondering which country and state we're living in. I think we could win on that alone. Love to hear other thoughts.
I think West Valley would be in the sand. We've done most of what's on the list already, and to mandate it all again is ridiculous.
Cameron, and maybe this is a question for my Spanish Fork staff to know, but do we know what the fiscal impact of withholding Class C road funds are in general to communities?
Waiting for Karen.
Yeah, we have a spreadsheet that shows how much every city got last year in Class C.
Paid.
The bizarre part about this conversation is that the cities who would have to comply with SB 34, it would have to update their modern income housing plans to be eligible for the TIF. And 80% of those cities have projects before the TIF. So it is a meaningful incentive if you want to access state dollars. But that is a different issue than the state reaching down into and behavior. That's not an incentive.
We've got some feedback coming on someone's end.
Sounds like someone's shoveling snow. Can someone mute their phone? It sounds like we're getting some feedback, like Nick said.
Looks like we're set now.
Okay. Who was speaking? I can't remember. Was that you, Mike?
It was me, but I think it's the money counter here at the bank that you're hearing. So sorry, we're counting money.
Maybe shoveling it.
Yeah, shoveling it. That's right. Yeah, I'm with Mayor Pike on that. I think that's with you knowing and having the information that that's not Schultz pressing that. It'd be interesting to find out where else it's coming from to try to just set us up to fail. But I'm all for, I'm all for taking that information where we need it to get to say, geez, here's where we're at and here's what we'd agree to. And to go much further beyond that is creating this kind of hole in all these cities' budget to withhold these funds. And then also the fact, like Mayor Pike said, some of those are just unrealistic. You're setting us up to fail. That's not a good story for the legislature to have, to just set cities up to fail.
And to clarify on the mortgage assistance piece, the reason that's one of the menu items is because we do have 2 cities that either do it or have looked into doing it. And so when we were assembling ideas for the menu, these 2 cities said, we're looking at doing this, would it count? So we went to the sponsors and the sponsors said, sure, that's a unique idea, we'll put it on there. The point though is that the vast majority of cities wouldn't be able to do it. So this number of 22 is being used against us. In actuality, the number that every city could choose from is a much smaller number. And that's why the 3 or 4, it matters, because it still provides you with some flexibility. The distinction being, if you have transit, you have to pick one of 2 items to get to your 4th one. And Don Christensen made a great point. West Valley has been really aggressive on housing. West Valley probably has done more than 4, and I know they have. I just can't tell you exactly how many they've done. Well, that is to West Valley's advantage when they're applying for the TIF. If they've done 10, that's great. They'll get a higher priority for TIF dollars than a city that's only done 3. That's the way an incentive is supposed to work. But you lose the incentive if you set the number so high that nobody can get to it, and if you're holding complexity revenue. So anyway, the other thoughts on if there's any other, basically really what I just need to know is if you are comfortable that our line in the sand is 3 or 4 items and no on the B and C, we will continue to be aggressive on those points, but we will need your help rallying the rest of the league to lobby legislators in the House to oppose any amendments or substitutes. And frankly, several House members are already being squirrely with us, who are normally champions of local government, are already being squirrely because of the pressure that's being applied.
Sorry, other thoughts, board members?
Chair Pike or Cameron, this is Andy Bierman. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify, when they want us, the language being that we need to adopt these, is that above and beyond current actions, or do current actions qualify?
You would need to update your plan to highlight what is listed in the menu. if you are already doing one of the menu items, you would need to tie it back to the menu item and say, here's our plan and how we're trying to implement. One of our main points, Andy, I'm glad you brought this up, is that Park City and West Valley and other cities have been really aggressive at planning for housing, and you should get credit for that work and not have to reinvent the wheel. So the expectation is that you update your plan, tying it back to the menu, explaining which menu items you're using, but you don't necessarily have to find new ones each year. These are the 5 that make sense for Park City. We started implementing them 2 years ago, and then you report on the implementation every year, and that qualifies you for the TIF funding.
Okay, thanks for the clarification. And I'm also supportive of holding the line on this one.
Okay. And is it too soon to say we don't want to be left holding the bag on this?
Plastic bag?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Don't go there this morning.
Yeah, too soon. I thought it might be. Okay, any other thoughts?
Sounds like you're okay.
Okay, while we've been sitting here, I just got a text update from Representative Potter that the bill will be moved out of committee today to tomorrow. So we will be lobbying the new committee accordingly. Watch for an action alert today. Another idea for your consideration is recognizing that this is going to be a power play and recognizing that there is a lot of sentiment in the general public against the state dictating density to cities. I'm going to give you just 2 data points to demonstrate that. Number 1, SB 34 is the 4th highest viewed bill of the session so far. Number 1 is Medicaid expansion, or number 4. Additionally, there's a change.org petition that has started collecting signatures and names from across the Wasatch Front, urging the legislature to oppose SB 34 because it's the state dictating density to local governments. From a league perspective, we're straddling the line between being a good partner in planning for growth and doing what we can to plan for growth, while also fighting for local authority and local responsibility. So on one hand, can help us, but they could also hurt us. And on the other hand, you have legislators, some who feel like the bill goes too far, and some who feel like the bill doesn't go enough. So we're in this really fascinating middle ground on the bill. Susan, Rachel, and I worked on an op-ed this weekend that we thought could help explain the league's position and call out this power play that right now is just behind closed doors, and say the league would oppose this power play, and here's why. We're here to be good partners, and this effort of certain individuals on Capitol Hill is about punishing cities. We think SB 34 should be about good planning, not about punishing cities. And we could submit that op-ed at the appropriate time, depending on the politics, and have it come from either the league officers themselves or from the entire league board. Thoughts on that approach?
Love to hear from others on this one. I'm okay with either, but it would be quite powerful if the whole board was willing to do that.
I would be willing to sign on as a board member.
Me too.
Likewise.
Here, here.
Same.
Well, then we'll do this. After the meeting is over, we'll send a draft out to the board to look at. Recognizing we don't have every board member on call, I want to make sure everyone has a chance to chime in before their names are used. And so we'll send you the draft. We've been going back and forth between using one of the daily newspapers or our regular Utah policy column. But in the meantime, we'll send out the draft for you to review it. It's a page long, so it'll only take a few minutes. And then I'll provide some context in the email for those, like, who are not, also they can be up to speed on it.
Could we put a deadline, like what time we need people to respond by if they have changes?
Yep, I agree.
Yeah, we have to.
Perfect. Okay, let's jump into sales tax. I've got Roger here, so I can stop talking for a moment. Roger, do you want to give a quick update of where we're at and where we think things are going this week?
To say that the situation is fluid is an understatement. I would sort of characterize things as of today as follows. There is going to be some form of a bill coming out taxing services as to be yet unnamed. I would expect at the end of this week. If that was going to be last week. The truth of the matter is that there has been some deliberate leaking to the public that certain, it's a big bill to tax almost all services except it's exempted medical, it's exempted financial, and it's exempted home, realtor fees, those three. But there's a whole lot of other people who think they've been told they've been out of the bill, but they're still in whatever unnamed proposal is out there. So that's the nature of, is there going to be a bill? Probably. What's in it? That's still up for, that's a jump ball right now. And frankly, I think the realization of they don't know what is in that proposal, the realization is set in a number of key quarters that they cannot do a complete process change this session. By that, dealing with all the local rates, dealing with the 50-50, et cetera, that's probably too much to get done. Now, understand, these are all informal. There's not a bill out there yet. We're gleaning bits of information that's coming to us, but they're coming from fairly reputable sources. Some of the key people said, no, there's just, we just can't deal with your situation this year. So assuming that that's true, then the question becomes, what are they realistically going to get done? And what does not dealing with us this year really mean? I still think there is a real debate over, one, how big the base increase will be and how much money there is. And frankly, there are some levels at which, unless they generate a fair amount of money, it's really difficult to make some of the changes I want to talk about. The issues that we've talked about that are of particular concern to us are the various local rates, including our 1% and 50-50. Well, if the statement that came from, I would say, the person who's probably the most influenced spoke to us, he just basically said, we're just not going to include you guys in the base product. Essentially, we'll just tax services at the state rate, we'll leave you guys out of it until we figure out what we're doing. And he made the example, said we realize we can't cut the rate and treat Scipio the same as Salt Lake. Well, it's nice to know that some messages have gotten through. And we're hearing the same thing. The question, though, that surfaces that sounds good on one hand. On the other, though, is if we're out, what's the best position to be out? In other words, if we've never said we were against base broadband, there's no purchase to it. Does that have the potential meaning that we'll never be brought in and to deal with these issues? So you get that question. There is another approach, is to say you tax us just like everything else, and that they take the amount of money that they would generate from expanded service base, and we just don't get it. They put it in a lockbox until we can figure out where it comes from, how much money, etc. There's that option. Frankly, I think my assessment is right now they're more inclined to the direction we just won't deal with the locals. I think there is this question of exactly what does that mean to be done. Again, these are decisions we're basically informed of. This is the direction we're going at the end of last week. It makes sense because they just simply can't get some of this done. And furthermore, they simply don't have the information. The question that becomes though is, where are we? What position do we want to take? I don't think we ever want to be in a position where we don't want to have expanded services in our base. We just like to know the best approach is just leave our rates alone and let us keep the money. And that might be an outgrowth at some point, but it isn't their position now. And they're very hung up on this issue of at the end of this whole process, they want to be able to say it was revenue neutral, which just kind of surprises me, since the bringing us to deal with fiscal problem. But do that as it may. That's what they want to be, and I think they're reluctant to at least say, yeah, accept all these other entities you got. So where we are sitting right now is we've not been told anything formally, but I think the direction is they simply can't deal with the whole picture this year. What gets done this year, what gets pushed off, and that becomes a little that's up in the air. The other question is, by putting us off for a year, what statuses are we going to be in as we begin that year study? For somebody else.
Yeah, thank you, Roger. We had this conversation with some of the intergovernmental people on Thursday at lunch, and we had a great discussion there. The initial conversation started by people saying, well, if they're going to leave us out, that's actually a good thing, because then you're not touching our rates and you're not touching the formula, so let's just stay out. As the conversation continued, there was the recognition that we don't want to be left out of base expansion in perpetuity, and there's no guarantee that the state would come back later and include local rates in the new untaxed service base. So then that got us back to the initial question, which is, if the legislature wants sales tax expansion to be revenue neutral, how do you make 19 local rates revenue neutral and impact neutral? And what do we do in the short term if they are not going to include us in their deliberations at this point? As Roger referenced, one option is that we just wait. The second option is what we've heard all session, which is this concept of a lockbox, that any new revenue from base expansion would be set aside, would not flow to cities and counties yet, to facilitate a dialogue about rates and formulas during the interim. This then leads to the ongoing debate about the definition of new money. Representative Schultz has consistently said that his version of new money is any dollar above what a city would receive or received last year. So what that would mean is this: in the current base of goods, let's say Ogden City received $1 million. And natural growth in that base means that next year you'd be at $1.1 million. Well, Representative Schultz would say that because you got $1 million last year, you're going to be locked in at $1 million next year. And so that extra 100,000, which is just natural growth in the base, would go in the lockbox, in addition to whatever sales tax is generated on the currently untaxed services. We've said that is absurd, because growth in the existing base is not new money. The real new money is just services that are currently untaxed. And there's a frequency issue here that the tax commission's not even going to have data about what those services are going to be and the sourcing of those services for 6 months beyond. But it does lead to this tricky question of political timing for us, which is, how much should we be pushing right now to have our rates and formulas included in the conversation to make sure we don't get left behind? How much do we just sit back and wait to see what they end up doing and then come back later to be included? How much do we want to try to get in front of this lockbox idea? There are some at the Capitol who have been floating the idea of the state doing some sort of resolution about the lockbox. So do we preempt that resolution with action of our own? Lots of lots of different concepts there, but the key question that we need some feedback from you is, in light of the timing of the different steps right now, how aggressive do you want us to be at making sure we are still, making sure that our rates are still part of the conversation during this session?
Yeah, and it's a certain element of risk assessment. I mean, I don't think the idea that we're going to be permanent is going to happen. There's much other factors that may happen. But frankly, one of the appealing aspects of the lockbox is if you're making decisions, you got to have information. The only way you get information is having those entities pay the tax. What you do with the money in the short term doesn't matter. So in some ways, there is some version of that. The problem is that it really comes down to the terms, what is new money? And I think personally, as I have to say, you have to recommend, you have an easy definition of money. It's people or entities that weren't paying taxes this year that paid them last year or next year. We're not going to talk about money that comes off our current tax base. But it is a very ambiguous situation, other than to say, I think reality has set it in various quarters. Geez, the dynamics on dealing with the rates and the adjustment is more than we can get out of this session.
Clear as mud. Your thoughts?
Well, personally, I think there's so much we don't know. I guess on the top of my head, I don't mind the lockbox idea to, again, help us buy time, essentially. We know that the governor and others are trying desperately to get to broaden the base by taxing some services. So I guess I'm hesitant to want to stand in their way on that. So, but I think it's impossible. And how many days do we have left?
We have 17 and a half business days.
But who's counting, right?
Yeah.
I just think it's unlikely they're going to figure all that out. So I don't know. I guess to your point, I think what I'm hearing you say, Cameron and Roger, is Roger in particular is, the state creating a lockbox of new local revenue sounds like a good idea. But am I also right in stating, or at least others share this opinion, I don't want growth in our existing 1%, just growth in that to be considered new money, new local revenue. That's growth in the existing formula. So I'd love to not have that be considered, and I don't know that you're saying that, but someone is. I don't know if that's Schultz. I think it's Schultz. Is that right? What am I missing? Is it?
No, it is Representative Schultz. Now, going back to before this session, Representative Schultz indicated his top priority this session was to change the 50-50. When I met with him on Thursday, he seemed resigned that they were not going to make any changes to rates and formulas this session. And we've had several key sources who told us the same thing confidentially. In fact, one of them even said to us on Friday, sleep easy this weekend, you're fine, nothing's going to happen to you during the session, it's too complicated. But the follow-up is, then what? Do they ignore us, or do they do this lockbox concept? Do they do a delayed implementation date? The lockbox, Mayor, to your point, Representative Schultz wants $1 more of growth to go in the lockbox, and we said no, and that's something that, again, we would need the league membership and the league army to really step up and say, growth in the current formula is not new money. Currently untaxed services, that's new money. So let's actually analyze what that looks like, but right now we don't know what will be taxed, where it will be sourced, and how much revenue it could generate to even facilitate or to even fill a lockbox, let alone facilitate a discussion of changing rates or formulas. And so again, the unknowns are frustrating.
Yeah, a couple of things, and I might put a slightly different spin on this. I think the question of can they get it all in this session, I think that's being answered. They can, they know. It's helped that finally some other entities like UTA and others realize, hey, our rates are impacted too. It's a little bit shocking, it's sort of like we by ourselves on this. Now some of that's helping. They can't get it all done, so it's assuming they get a base expansion bill passed by itself, which I still think is up in the air.
I think it happens, Roger, I think it's up.
Well, I think it will happen at some level. The question is how big that level is.
It's against the law. So let me preface my statement with that. I know it's against the law to bet on legislation, but I really want to bet on legislation and do an over/under of the new tax revenues generated.
I think there's enough. I think there's enough personal pride and political pressure to get a bill that taxes some new things. I'll stipulate to that. How big that is up in the air. I think on that question. The question. So they'll get that. I think the issue of how are things positioned to move to step 2 next year thereafter is what's really the question. I don't see us being ignored under either side. But I think one of the questions though is I don't know how much more information you're going to have next year than you're going to have, barring the tax being collected, knowing where it's coming from, etc.
Hey, Don Christensen, you were with Senator Harper over the weekend. Is anything you want to report from what he said on sales tax?
Looks like Don is muted.
You there, Don?
Trying to unmute him.
Myself.
Yep,
There we go.
we can hear you now, Don.
That and Comcast wiped me out and then put me back in. Our legislative roundup this Saturday said basically the voter approved taxes in each municipality and county are not being discussed at this point. And he also mentioned that most of the language of the bill is coming out of a group of 4. He's on the committee that should be writing the bill, but they've only met twice at all, and nothing was ever decided. But that group of 4 is doing the writing. And he's a little frustrated with the whole process.
He's in a long line.
Pardon me?
I say there are a number, particularly in the Senate, are very frustrated.
Yes. But he said he's advocated for years to do it as a interim study group type of thing, and nobody wants to do it that way. They want to do it in 5 days or 17 and a half.
Thanks, Don. Other thoughts on other thoughts on the lockbox concept or other potential next steps here?
Jump in, board members. Any thoughts?
I tend to agree with Mayor Pike that I'm not completely against. I think a lockbox might give us some decent data, but the hard line for me, for us in Spanish Fork, would be that the definition of new money is not what Representative Schultz thinks. New money could be whatever comes from taxing services. I get that, so we can get the data somewhat cleared up, but there's no way with what we've pitched to our citizens about a RAP tax passed this last year and planning on the money that will be generated because of that. And then looking forward, and I know that nothing's guaranteed, but in the growth that we're experiencing in the retail sector here, we've made plans of, committees meeting and discussing what to spend that money on coming up. And our forecasts have been, and it's spent considerable time and money in getting those numbers of what a RAP tax means over the next 10 years before you have to renew it. And now all of a sudden you're saying, oh, well, it's capped at this. That would be a terrible precedent set here.
Not to mention the fact some of you bonded on that road.
Right, exactly. Could be, yeah. Yeah, we could, bond off that. That's exactly right.
Which is what St. George has already done, and I'm sure many others.
Well, we have a board city that has shared with us the fact they're actually going to have a higher interest rate on bonds because they went after bond right before the session started, and just the rhetoric of changing the 50-50 will end up costing those taxpayers more money in that particular city. And that's one board city, but we've also heard from other cities who are not on the board that they've faced similar challenges when they've been meeting with bond counsel simply because of the rhetoric.
Well, and this is, maybe a little nitpicky, but with the state, if they're wanting to basically cap, any growth in the existing, formula and keep that, if you will, would they also like to take the risk of the other side if it went down?
Yeah. The irony, Mayor, is that what Representative Schultz keeps referencing, essentially capping every city at your current levels, that would create 248 hold harmlesses for the 1%, in addition to the hold harmlesses for all the RAPs, UTA, and other local option taxes. So he would create north of 400 hold harmlesses, and if the economy were to tank next year, those hold harmlesses still have guarantees. In fact, the hold harmlesses from '83 that existed for decades actually helped those cities weather the economic storm better than the non-hold harmless cities. So, slapping a hold harmless on something solves a short-term problem, but actually creates other issues. And we've dealt with plenty of hold harmlesses in our day, and we think that's a winning argument with senators, maybe not in the House, but with senators, people who've been around a while, saying we don't want to create any more hold harmlesses, let alone hundreds of them.
I think that's a good message, Cameron.
Well, and in the message part of it, what the discussion we just had with SB 34 of saying, here's an op-ed that says, hey, we're willing to work with the state in this way to figure out problems. I got an idea most citizens of cities would be completely frustrated with saying, oh, more of our sales tax dollars that the city pitched that this is a good deal to even increase that in our community would now be going to the state instead of my community, and everything else. I mean, that would be a terrible message for them to have to defend. And I think we need to make sure people know that a little bit is how hotly contested that would be. There's no citizens of a city that would say, oh yeah, I want to send my money up to the state that they already think has more money than they know what to do with, and say, oh, we're just giving them more money and that takes it away from caps my city. I think that's a terrible message that have to defend.
That's a great point. So here's, Mayor Pike, here's what I think I'm hearing, and if others want to chime in, please do so. What I'm hearing is for us as staff to continue pushing to be involved in base expansion, whether that's, realistically, that's not this session for us based on what we've been told, but to make sure we're still at the table long-term for base expansion. Whether that means that there's a creation of a lockbox or another mechanism to make sure that we're at the table. With also pointing out that any reduction of rates or changes to formulas is going to have a major impact on those communities. And so we need to keep pounding that message. Then once the official base expansion proposal becomes official, then we should be prepared to do an op-ed or other information both to our members and potentially to the general public about what base expansion and next steps could mean for local government. Is that a fair assessment of what we've heard?
I believe it is. Other comments?
That's what I heard.
Anyone disagree with what Cameron just summarized? Okay.
And so, you know, that's consistent with where the intergovernmental people were at on Thursday by the end of that discussion too. So the good news is the Lynn Paces and the Gary Cranes of the world who are on the Capitol every day, and you as the elected officials, we're all on the same page moving forward, which was something we wanted to make sure that we accomplished over the next few days, or the last few days. As things change, we'll keep you updated as best as possible, and then we expect that by next Monday at LPC, we'll be able to do a little more in-depth analysis, so we think there'll be a plan out by then.
The moment of truth is when they unveil the bill.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's when, Roger?
When they actually put a piece of legislation out that says we're going to tax these entities and what else they say.
Gotcha.
Roger and I have a 3-hour strategy meeting scheduled this afternoon with Kristen Cox, who's the head of the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. She's invited the Salt Lake Chamber, us, Wasatch Front Regional Council, and a couple others for a small, again, 3-hour meeting to talk through tax policy, all of the rates, the 1%, transportation, land use, all of it. So after this afternoon, we'll have a better sense of where we think the governor's office is going to go. The interesting thing for us is the officers met with the governor in November, and he said he was not interested in changing the 50-50. He restated that. Local officials say to us now, and Maurer has said this. Mike Maurer, his deputy chief of staff, has told us the same thing. We've heard different things out of the governor's office of planning and budget, and so or management budget now, or GOMB or which one is it? Yeah. So we'll have a good sense after the discussion today with Chris Cox. So we'll be able to report back on that later too.
And it's no secret, they did the drivers.
Cameron?
Okay, and then Mayor Caldwell just texted me. So he said that his phone isn't working for him to speak. So he says he agrees with the need to stay involved in the conversation regarding texting services for now, because he doesn't trust that they'll come back to fix us. So we need to stay involved there and keep evaluating what the impact's going to be on rates and taxes. So thank you, Mayor Caldwell, for the text. Sorry, your phone's not cooperating with the mute.
Don? Go ahead.
Cameron, in talking to Senator Harper, one of the 4 that was mentioned in that group was the governor's office. He didn't mention any names, but he said that was the one that was pushing everything.
Okay, it's got to be Phil Dean then, so that's good to know, Don. The other person who's driving is Senator Lincoln Fillmore from South Valley. He's in South Jordan, represents the surrounding cities there. And
He was mentioned as one of the 4 too.
Yeah, but he has been adamant in his opposition to the 50-50 formula. So for those of you keeping track at home, the scoreboard looks like this. House leadership wants to change the 50-50. The architects of the bill in the House do not.
And I would say probably the strongest person in that group is Tim Quinn.
Yep.
From Park City.
Yep, he's been phenomenal. On the Senate side, Senate leadership does not want to change the 50-50 formula. The Senate architects are split. The governor does not want to change 50-50. His staff on management and budget side, they do. So hopefully you kept track of that scoreboard, because that's where it gets complicated. Then you have the Chamber of Commerce in Salt Lake and Ivory Homes and others who are pushing to change it on their side. And then you have the League, the Association of Counties and Transportation Entities who are pushing to not make changes to the rates and distribution formula until we have actual data. So there's your scoreboard. Hopefully you keep track of all that. Or trust us to keep track of it. This is the better way to say it.
I think that's important. Cameron, I'm just curious, why would the governor's office, the budget folks, why would they care about the 50-50?
Phil Dean for years has wanted to change the 50-50. The last time I talked to Chris Cox about it, she said she was not convinced that changing the 50-50 would do anything, and that's why she wanted to get together with us for a good brainstorming session.
Let me add this about Phil. Phil's an extremely bright, talented guy. He was on the staff of the legislature for a number of years, and he did the work for Representative Jim Nielsen, who came up with the last big proposal to change distribution. I know how much time Phil spent on that. I think he feels it ought to be changed, but I actually think the bigger issue for him and for Kristen is expanding the base. I mean, I think they view this as an opportunity to do it all. I think expanding the base is a big issue. I'm not trying to diminish the supports, but I think it starts with expanding the base. Clearly, the governor's behind that. The issue of expanding the base is we've always said if you have new money, the discussion of the 50-50 becomes a possibility. I think Phil views this as a chance to have new money. The problem is it isn't easily understood new money. You don't know where it's coming from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that's what they're up against. So I'd sort of characterize it in this sense. Phil's been the driver of the base expansion argument, and the others sort of tagged along with that. And I think we'll be interested to see what we find out today. I think you're starting to see some separation of those having to be all done at the same time.
Yep, I think that's an excellent summary.
Thank you. Is there more, Cameron, anything else? And I want to make sure, members of the board, that you've felt you've had adequate opportunity to say yay and nay and make any comments specifically that you'd like to. Silence is golden.
Perfect. Well, it is 10:15. Let me do one quick update, and then we'll ask for a vote on ratification, assuming, Nick, can you see if we have a quorum? And if we don't, then we'll just have to ask the officers for it.
I believe we are missing one.
So as Nick checks the numbers on the quorum front, we spent a lot of time at LPC last week talking about Tier 2 public safety retirement. The motion by the LPC was to oppose the expansion of the Tier 2 benefits unless funded. The Utah Association of Counties met on Thursday for their policy committee. They voted to support the expansion of Tier 2 benefits if funded. The key overlap for both organizations is the funding. We met with Senator Harper, who's the bill sponsor, and he indicated to us at the end of last week that the funding question was going the wrong way, that he thought there was going to be a move in the Senate by Senator Fillmore and others to remove the 1 year of state funding that is in his bill. So right now the bill has 1 year of full state funding, and then local governments would pick up the tab. Senator Harper thought we could lose the 1 year of state funding in the bill, in which case local governments would be picking up the tab for the expanded Tier 2 benefit. We have a meeting this afternoon. We will be at 2 places at once and still trying to figure out how to make that work, but we have a meeting this afternoon with Senator Jerry Stevenson, who's a former mayor and head of executive appropriations in the Senate. We're just going to ask him with UAC point blank, is the Senate, or is there a chance for the legislature to fully fund this Tier 2 benefit expansion or not? If there is, then we'll make a run at trying to get it funded. If he gives us the sign that it's unlikely to be fully funded, then to me, the LPC position said oppose unless funded. If he says it's unlikely to be funded, then we'll need to oppose the bill before it gets even more momentum and leaves us with an unfunded mandate. But we wanted to circle back with you to make sure everyone was aware of those dynamics before we met with Senator Stevenson this afternoon.
Thank you, Cameron, for that update. Questions, board members? I'm so nervous about the funding side of this. I'm not sure, and I'd love to hear any thoughts from any of you. I mean, are there any cities that just feel like, yes, we've got to do this, and we can find the funding locally immediately, or even in a year or two? It's a great concern to me personally. Other thoughts?
I spent the weekend with my father-in-law, former police chief, and a current county sheriff in Utah, and explaining this to them. And they agreed that yeah, the oopsie now of we shouldn't have done this or that, that it's unfair to put it on cities. And these are a couple of guys that would be for fixing this, obviously, but they know that putting their cities in financial jeopardy is not the right way. But I also have got a message from somebody that used to be close to state politics, saying that we got hit kind of hard by the messaging of it, that we were against it, and that a news reporter kind of ran with that. I didn't see it or read it, but wondering if we saw that at all.
We did. It was in the Dujanovic and Dave, what's it called? Dave Dujanovic. And Mayor Pike and I did some interviews for it. My 95-year-old grandmother listens to that show, and she said, Mayor Pike, you and I did really well. But yes, Mike, we got hit there because KSL radio, news radio, has been really pushing expanding the benefit. But I wanted to make sure everybody was still comfortable with that direction. Mayor Caldwell texted, since his phone isn't working, to say opposed unless funded is still his vote because of the potential unfunded mandate. And so that's still our position, and if people are comfortable with that, then Mayor Pike, we're good. We just wanted to give you that update.
Okay, everyone else okay with that for now? I realize we all support public safety, and it hurts me to think that we don't have a better way to do this, but I don't know how we can take it on 100% ourselves. I heard that loud and clear, Mike Mendenhall, last week at LPC, didn't you?
Yep, I think that was the consensus. Is there's nobody. And I appreciated the discussion that went on. There's nobody that supports public safety more than the cities, but an unfunded mandate doesn't help that.
Yeah, it's a matter of, even though this certainly could be identified as a high priority, what's next, you know? And that's kind of what's going on in my city council, is they're saying, yeah, how do we, you know, we're having a hard time in a full employment market getting a lot of positions. And so if the issue is recruitment and retaining employees, that crosses into other areas, not just public safety, although that is probably of our most concern right now. Anyway, I think we go ahead with it, Cameron, as you've eloquently stated.
Perfect. Well then, Mayor, just to summarize, and then we'll have you take a ratification vote. We do have a quorum, and then we're 8 minutes over, but hopefully we can get done here in like 2 minutes, and let people go on with their days. And thank you for making time this morning. To summarize, on referendum, meeting this afternoon, we'll put forward those concepts we discussed today, and we'll let you know how that goes. On housing and SB 34, we will circulate today a draft op-ed from the entire board. So this will not just be the rapid response portion of the board, it'll be the entire board to look at. We'll have a deadline attached to it to ask people to review it. That bill will be in committee tomorrow afternoon, and then it will actually wait for a couple of weeks because of the fiscal note to be considered. And so Whether we submit the op-ed this week or not, that's up in the air. We'll let you know if we hear more on the potential hijacking of the bill. On tax policy, we will keep pushing to make sure we are at the table with our rates and formulas to be included. Well, let me back up. Continue to be at the table so the base expansion includes our local rates, period. Whether that happens this session or in the interim is still up in the air, but it will likely be an interim discussion. And we're willing to have a discussion about the lockbox concept for new revenue, which means currently untaxed services, period. New revenue does not include new growth in the existing base. And we are willing to look at discussions about reducing rates or changing formulas once we have real data about how much new revenue base expansion can generate for local governments and where it comes from. And the tax commission is still months away from being able to source that data. Oh, that's quite a summary. And then on public safety retirement, we'll let you know how our conversation goes with Senator Jerry Stevenson this afternoon. We have LPC next week. We'll ask for your ratification of current recommended positions. If anybody has any questions about a recommended position, ask us now. Otherwise, we accept that vote to get us through the next 4 days. And then, if people have topics they want on a board on the LPC agenda for Monday, let us know.
Okay.
Hey, can I just chime in real quick? Sorry, I'm finally figuring out this Zoom thing, I think. On the retirement funding, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Get to it.
Okay. I don't know that it's a really good idea if you think about it. I like how there was a comment at the last LPC that somebody said we can control better if we do salaries instead of retirement when you fund something like that, and you have a mandated retirement. So my feeling is that really it's not a sound policy. I know that it communicates something different if it seems like we're not supporting that or helping our public safety officers, but I think it's having a funding for 1 year and then having the cities scramble to see how we can cover it later. It's just, I don't think we want to go down that road. If there's any way we can get some other way of supporting our officers without having this, like through a retirement fund, I think that would be better. That's my opinion.
Perfect.
I think that's in harmony with what Cameron just summarized, and what others have said. So thank you, Jewel. Are there any questions about any of the staff positions on bills? Otherwise, Cameron, I think I heard you saying you'd like to, since we have a quorum, we'd like to entertain a motion to approve those positions on those applicable bills. Is that correct, Cameron?
Yep.
I'm ready for such a motion if you are, board.
I make that motion to ratify the positions that staff's laid out.
Second.
Okay, the motion was made by Mike Mendenhall. Who made the second?
Jewel.
Jewel Allen. Any discussion on the motion? The third one. Were you saying something, Don?
No.
Okay. All in favor of the motion then, say aye.
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 Any opposed to the motion, say nay.
And Mayor Pike, Mayor Caldwell texted his support. Hopefully, Mr. Church, that size. Okay, we're good.
Excellent. Okay, that motion carries. Cameron, anything else? And I assume there's no need for a closed session.
No, thank you for your time and thank you for your input. It's extremely helpful for us knowing that when we go into some of these confrontations and deliberations, knowing that we've got your support and that we're all on the same page. So thank you for the time this morning. We'll plan on seeing hopefully all or if not most of you at LPC next Monday.
Very good. Someone make a motion to adjourn and I think we'll be good.
So moved. Jewel.
Thank you, Jewel. I guess we don't need any more than that, do we?
No, all in favor, hang up.
All right. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Just let me know myself.